Hello and welcome back to Serious About Rugby League's podcast. Me and Dan are back to give you all the latest in Rugby League, so let's jump straight back into it. So today we're going to start with the Super League again. We're 2 games in and we've got a clear split at the top of the table. We've got 4 teams on two wins, 4 teams on 1 win, 1 loss and 4 teams on 2 losses. So start at the top bracket, 2 wins from 2. St Helens, Wigan are 2 of those clubs. They're the ones that sit with the best points difference. Have you seen these 2 clubs play? What do you think so far this season?
I think Saints have started strongly. Impressive how they dispatched of Castleford. And they came through a tricky game in France just about against Catalan. So it's been a perfect start for them, especially since we kind of dubbed them to be the overall winners at the end of the year. So we're looking well placed in that respect. Wigan, good win on Australia. I'm not sure how much you can read into that with it being kind of the new experiment in Rugby League, and a comprehensive game against Salford. I think tells you all the story you need to know really about Wigan.
Yeah, I think Wigan look a bit better than people anticipated at this point in the year, but there's obviously a long season to go. So I think at this point you just take the results as they are, see how they go on in the next few weeks. St Helens, however, I think looking very impressive, very impressive. Like I said, that victory in France, it's so hard to go to France and win at any point in the season, but to do it so early on, to push through in a difficult situation, difficult conditions, I think they did really well for themselves. Especially after the Morgan Knowles incident, and they sort of put themselves under the cosh a bit, but they got through it, came out with a big win. The other 2 teams on 2 wins are 2 Yorkshire clubs, Wakefield and Leeds. I watched Wakefield. I think they look very impressive. I think the only problem I have with Wakefield is the composure in certain situations, and I think if you watch a Salford game, that was a big... What am I trying to say?
It was a big tick in the box, really, wasn't it?
They just sort of got through that game, and Salford don't look that impressive, but they got through that game. I don't know. Maybe they'll come to times in the season where they play against teams like Widnes, Salford, Hawkeye, and they struggle a bit more. And it's just about having that composure in key moments and making themselves get through the game, get the 2 points, and move on to next week.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Wakefield the way they started. They carried on that 2017 form. KR game at the opening day of the season could have been a difficult one. KR at home with that fantastic support, but they came through it, and then like we say, that Salford tie was a real test. Wakefield sides of yesteryear might have fallen short there, but they pulled through in the end, didn't they?
Yeah, I feel Sky Sports covered it perfectly in terms of, I think it was Barry McDermott or Terry O'Connor was saying that in previous years you turn up to Wakefield and there's not a lot of respect for the club, but now you turn up to Wakefield and everybody expects a game, everybody expects a challenge. They've built a team that is a top 6 team and a consistent top 6 team. For the club to turn around in such a short time like that is really impressive. And then last, your lads, Leeds, I think pretty much what everybody expected at this point in the season.
Yeah, 2 from 2. Not the most convincing by any stretch of the imagination, but we said on the first podcast we thought Warrington would do them in the opening game. Wasn't the case, so that's a tick in a box for Leeds in that respect. Unconvincing is probably the right word to use against KR in that game at Ellen Road, but importantly, they got the 2 points. And again, it could have gone a different way, but for the last couple of minutes.
Leeds have this tendency to win crunch games, and I was really worried. I mean, we spoke about it in one of the podcasts about whether Leeds will have the mentality at the end of the season to go and win the grand final. And early doors, they're showing that they do, winning these tight, scrappy matches, and that's what's key to winning big games at the end of the year. Obviously, next week's going to be a bit of a different problem. In Melbourne. They're not hiding any tricks. There is a full 17 out there ready to play Leeds. So I think it'll be a bit more difficult this week. And maybe the repercussions of that is they come back to Super League and don't play as well for the first couple of weeks. But I feel like the early signs are good for Leeds. So we'll move on to the other 8 teams. We'll just glance over a couple of these teams. A couple of the ones I want to really look at. Widnes. Big win first day against Catalan at home. Again, you can win into Catalan's away form being a problem. But Widnes needed to turn up and they did. And then they go to the league leaders the following week and they lose by a point in a very, very scrappy match that they could have won at any point.
Yeah, there was a lot of scrappy games, wasn't it, in that second round, especially the week of fixtures that have just gone. But I thought they were good value, maybe surprise package. People didn't have much hope for them, but they dispatched of Catalans in a way, really, which is quite impressive. I will just say that I did predict that.
You just remember everything, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I've been really impressed with them, the way they've handled themselves in the opening 2 weeks, and I kind of hope it continues, really.
There's a lot of people wrote off Widnes because they didn't realise how much strength they have. I think there's a lot of Widnes fans will tell you that there was injury problems and etc. last season, which made them a bit weaker towards the tail of the season. But if this squad stays together and they can keep a group of 20 together fit, there's hope for the top 8 yet. And then right at the bottom, Catalan Dragons. They have been the disappointment so far this season. I mean, you can talk about Warrington and whether they're going to replicate last season, but I mean, Warrington had to play Leeds first game of the season. It's never an easy game to play, so I don't think you can read into that too much. Whereas Catalan have played against Widnes and against Centellians. Okay, Centellians are a good team and they're going to be up there, but they were at home against Centellians, and they came here first game of the season against a team everybody thought they were just going to walk over, and they got beat comprehensively. It looks like a troublesome season again for Catalans.
Yeah, for Catalans, those sort of games against Widnes are the ones they have to win to avoid being in the same position as last year, or being even worse perhaps. Nobody really expected much from them against Saints. We know Saints were a strong outfit, but it's still disappointing to see them go down in the way they did. But yeah, the Widnes game's the one you look at and you pinpoint it and think, that's really, really poor against a side who... It was two unknowns, really, unknown entities in Widnes and Catalans, and for Widnes' sake, they came out on top. But Catalans have got a lot of rebuilding to do.
Moving on to the Championship then, we've got Toronto, who had a massive result at the weekend. When I say massive, I don't mean in positive fashion. They played the only other team to get promoted from League One, and they only came out with a point. Now, that's a big result in terms of the top of the table, because everybody's assumed that Toronto would beat everybody, and if they beat Lee, they finish top. And there's been a hiccup 2 weeks in. What do you think?
We mentioned that win against Lee that already came on the first game of the season, which was really important for them. I know you were there. They came back from behind, didn't they, to secure a good win. But momentum has kind of been stopped by a resolute Barrow side in testing conditions. I know all around the country, especially where I was, it was snowing, it was muddy. And that really evens and levels out the playing field. And I think that's obviously got a big factor as to why Barrow were able to compete with Toronto for such large periods. But that definitely hurts their promotion ambitions. I know they're still at the top four, so it's in their own hands at the end of the day, but it definitely hurts the ego a little bit and the fairy tale of Toronto to suffer a draw. It's not a defeat, but it's a draw against arguably the weakest team in the division, and one of the easiest games they're going to have all year.
The two undefeated clubs in the Championship, London and Featherstone. Now, we spoke about London in our first podcast when we were predicting league positions, etc., etc., and we sort of glanced over Featherstone, and then over the last couple of weeks we've been speaking about it more, and Featherstone have looked more and more like a top four side. Can you argue with them now?
No, I don't think you can. From watching them against Halifax on that opener, they started really quickly. The likes of Ridyard, a class above in the Championship, controlled the game really, really well. Holmes looks a decent addition as well. Thackeray's enjoying his rugby, scoring freely. And they blitzed a decent Toulouse side, in all honesty. 5 second-half tries. Pretty profitable, and if they continue in that vein of form, then there's no reason they can't finish 2, 3.
I agree. I think that Featherstone now look like the team third, if not second, first, and it will all depend on when they're coming up against Lee and Toronto, and whether they can accept that challenge and take that challenge into their own stride. Like you said, they've got some quality. They've got some Super League quality in the team, along with some young players that look very, very, very powerful, and it's all about whether they can take that to the next stage, in my opinion, and I hope they can. The sort of team that you never really expected to be up there, and now that they're up there, everybody's favourite underdog sort of thing. So we're going to move on to some of the fixtures over the next couple of weeks. We're going to do this slightly differently than we've done in the past. We're not going to look at every single fixture and try and rush through them. We're going to both take a punt at our game of the week. So I'm going to start with my match of the week for this coming round, so round 3 of Super League. And my match of the week is the Cheshire Derby. So we're looking at Widnes versus Wyre. I think this is a hugely important game. I think Widnes have looked really, really strong, but they're coming up against the old rivals, Warrington, who have been extremely, extremely underperforming. And they need to turn up against a Widnes team that'll be thinking, this is our time to get a scalp on the next door neighbours, a bit of bragging rights in the local area. There's a lot of ways this game could go. Obviously, they've both got big physical packs, so it could all go down the middle. But I have pointed out the way that Widnes are going to win, in my opinion, is whether Joe Mellor and Tom Gilmore turn up. The halfbacks look very impressive so far this season. The combination looks very, very good. And I think it's all in their hands, really. Young partnership for normal standards in Super League. If they can take this team forward over the next 5 years, they could become a very impressive side. Warrington, on the other hand, I think it all needs to come up the middle. I think you're looking at Chris Hill, Ben Murdoch-Masila, and whether they can get the team onto the front foot and give people like Goodwin on the out edges, Atkins on the edges, space to create chances for the likes of Lynham and Matty Russell. But I think either way, it should be one to watch, and I'm glad that it's finally back on Sky.
So with Sean taking that game, I've been left with nothing else other than Hull KR and Catalan, with all the teams down under at the moment. Big bottom of the table clash, two sides without a win. Massively important for one of them to register some points on the board. Maybe even a draw at this stage wouldn't be bad for either of them. Hull KR, the more impressive of the two sides, if you could say that. Push Leeds in the last game, very good towards the end. Unlucky to not come out with anything. Usually a decent atmosphere, counts for more than you'd imagine, especially at KR. Catalans, on the other hand, shambolic last time out, really, really poor. So I'm almost expecting more of the same. It's going to take a big effort from Catalans to turn that round. Quite the opposite of Sean, still looking in the halves, but this time more experience with Maguire, Sean Lunt, Danny Tickles in the squad now, new signing. And I really expect those three kind of to control the game for KR.
Okay, and we'll move on to round 4. I'm again going for a Warrington game, but this being the Warrington game against Wigan. So you could really say a key time for the Warrington side. They've got the big derby that they need to win to sort of show some pride, and then a big game against Wigan who look very impressive. I think this is going to be the opposite to the Widnes game for Warrington. I feel like if they're going to beat Wigan, they need to get on the edges. I think Wigan's edge defence has always been a problem. Over the last couple of seasons, there's been a big problem with Wigan's edge defence, and if Lynham and Russell can get the ball in the hands, they could create serious problems, and that all comes from out the back play, and that's going to come through Stefan Ratchford. I feel like it's very important Stefan Ratchford gets his hands on the ball as much as possible. On the flip side to that, Wigan dominate the ruck, and that's how they win games. Tony Clubb and Ben Flower have been exceptional starting this season. The platform they set on the field, getting the ruck speed to the Wigan tempo very early doors. And again, I think if Wigan do that against any team, they're going to be a threat, and they're going to be the guys that you want to look out for in that game. That is on Sky again, so that's one that I would recommend watching.
So finally, my last game for round 4 is that of Castleford against Hull FC. A really difficult one to call, I think. Hull will have been down under for the best part of 2 weeks. Castleford, on the other hand, will have not played, obviously, this week through there being not enough teams in the country to fulfil the fixtures. So it's a case of what's going to play a bigger part. Is it going to be the Australia hangover, or is it going to be the Castleford lads who've been sat around biting the nails, doing not a lot for the last few weeks? And having started the season, it's clear to see that Castleford are missing Hardacre. He's a massive part of that side. There's a gaping hole at the moment. Roberts has struggled to really fill in. You've got to look at that as a weak point. Hull always strong anyway. 2 closely matched sides in 2017. You'd imagine it'll be much the same this year, but I think it's just really hard to call, Sean. I don't know whether you think about the season's been really disjointed already. It always happens every year with this World Club Challenge, and it kind of just takes away from any momentum anyone's already built up.
These guys are pros. These guys are being told routines, how to get in and out, and they shouldn't be coming back with such a hangover that it causes them to lose games. I feel like Hull are the stronger of the two sides, but there's some big injuries. Kicking game's going to be important. So Sneed-Gale, it's always a big matchup. It's the 2 sevens that we all know about. Whoever wins that battle wins the game for me. Moving on to the Championship, and the big game, the big headline act for the Championship this week, London versus Featherstone, the 2 undefeated teams. They're coming together really early doors. What do you think is going to happen? Have you looked at it into it much?
I've not looked into it much. I've only seen Featherstone play this year, so off the back of that, I can only really look at Featherstone. I've already mentioned Martin Ridgeard's been really, really impressive. A blend of youth and experience, I think, is really key for Featherstone. Big Pat, we've already said Super League quality. But the same vein, London are exactly the same. Plenty of quality in their side throughout the ranks. It's really difficult to call. It might, at the end of the day, come down to home advantage. That's as much as it could be.
Yeah, I have looked into this game a little bit, and I think the back line's very important for Featherstone. I think you've got Hardman, Briscoe, as you mentioned earlier, Thackeray, and whether those boys can dominate the outsides, and if they can, obviously London have got the likes of Dixon and Williams and stuff. If they can be dominated, that's the areas that they're going to be able to exploit. And as you say, home advantage is very important, so they're going to have to exploit those areas. Ridgeard's very important, but I think the main man for London would be Jared Summit. If he can continue to perform at the level he has been over the last couple of years, is going to be very difficult to stop for any team this season. I think this is genuinely the only game of round 3, Super League, Championship League 1, that is very, very difficult to call. I wouldn't be able to put my eggs in one basket. So if at all possible, I would recommend trying to get that game watched. I don't know if it's actually available online, but if you're around the London area, I would recommend getting down there because it will be possibly the biggest game of the Championship. Right, we're going to move on to our off-the-field section. This is the all off-the-field news. Once again, the England coach. It feels like every time we've done a podcast so far, we've been talking about the England coach and what's going to happen. Now, we've got some confirmation that Wayne Bennett should be the England coach until at least 2020, which is big news. However, that's not where it ends. There's a possibility, and it is at this stage only a possibility, but a strong one, that the person taking over from Wayne Bennett when his time finishes as England coach will be Darryl Powell. I am going to say it straight away and say that if Darryl Powell becomes the England coach, I'd want him on a full-time basis. I feel like a part-time coach for somebody of Powell's experience, is that the best way of putting it, would be foolish of us. It would be foolish of us. There's too much going on in world rugby to have another part-time England coach.
Yeah, I think 2 years is a long way to look in the future. We said on the last one, I think I'm going to stick by it, that Bennett's the right man now, and for the foreseeable to take us through this year, where there's not all a great deal going on, through to the Four Nations, why not the World Cup?
My main concern for the future is that there's a lot of international games being played over the next couple of years, more than we've ever seen in an international calendar before. And it's important that we have some clarity over who's going to take us to that next World Cup. Because that next World Cup is the big chance for England. We got to a final this year. We've really, really improved on what we're going to put out there, what level we're performing at. But the next one's in England. It's our conditions. It's in our own backyard. If we can't win it in 2021, when are we going to win it, is the real question. And I feel like these need to be put into place sooner rather than later. And if Darryl Powell's the man, Darryl Powell's the man. I think he's a great coach. He did really, really well with his time at Featherstone. He's done exceptionally at Castleford. So we can't say that he's not the right man. I feel like he could be the right man. His playing style could be good for England, but we need to get those plans into place before the next set of fixtures, just so that we can get ourselves ready for the World Cup, and the World Cup's the key aim over this period. Other issues off the field. I say issues, it's not really an issue, this one. This is more, some people see it as a positive. I don't know about yourself. The NCL is on TV. Free Sports have agreed a deal with the NCL to show a game a week, pretty much, on Free Sports. That's on Sky, Freeview, all the channels if you want to look it up. I think this is a big move. When you talk about amateur rugby league and amateur football, or semi-pro rugby league and semi-pro football, and you look at the conference broadcasting on BT in football, and what would it be like showing the conference in rugby league? It's a completely different game. These are amateur lads. This isn't like football where the semi-pro, they're getting paid enough to live a wage, and some of them are pro clubs in the conference. This is pure amateur rugby league, and I feel like it's a great spectacle, not only for the fans, for the families that want to watch it at home, for the families that want to go down to the game, for the lads that are actually playing the game themselves. This is great to be able to say, yeah, I'm playing rugby, I'm on TV.
I agree with everything you said. Plenty of positives. Good news for the amateur game, it only raises awareness, the exposure, increasing quality of the competition, the financial benefits. Obviously, big kudos to Free Sports, and then Rugby AM and Alex Simmons and JJB have had big say in that, haven't they? Taken on a lot. You can only hope it works, but the flip side of that is it seems like a massive kick in the teeth for Championship and League One clubs. Now I know it's out of their hands what Free Sports decide with the NCL, and it's good for the amateur game. But for those clubs who are signed up with a deal for Sky, who never show any games, bar the Summer Bash and the qualifiers games when a Super League club's involved, it seems like a massive kind of turning of the back. They're only featured when Toronto play them on Premier Sports this year. So whilst it's good for all the amateur sides and it's good for the Super League, it's much like we said before, those boys in the middle are kind of missing out, I feel.
So we've got the big game at the weekend, that being the World Cup Challenge, when I talk about the big game. And we're just going to quickly point out, I mean, we spoke about Leeds, and we know their strengths, and they've been gritty so far this year. It's going to be a completely different challenge when they come up against the Storm. The Storm team has been named, the squad's been named at least, and 1 to 17 is the strongest squad that I can see in the Storm setup. I feel like this is going to be a tough game for Leeds. Like, that's without a question. And realistically, for me anyway, I think the Storm are going to have to not turn up for Leeds to have a chance. This Melbourne team is much similar to the one that was back in the mid-noughties, the one that dominated rugby league, and players like Slater and Smith just don't get found in rugby league. Like, it's generational, and this squad's got something about it. Hopefully, for the English game, I'm just praying for dignity. I'm praying for dignity because last season we turned up and Warrington did a big job over Brisbane, and Wigan did really, really well to beat Cronulla. Just to be able to go to Australia and show some dignity. It's a different game down there, different atmosphere. I mean, last time I went down there, Wigan lost 34-16 or 34-18, something like that, to the Sydney Roosters. That just shows the depth. And if they come up here, it's a gritty game. Down there, it's a skill-based game, and they need to show some pride in what they're doing for me, Leeds. And hopefully, we can get that little bit of dignity and maybe steal the win.
I couldn't believe the other day when I read it was 10 years since Leeds beat the Storm at Headingley. I remember watching that. Seems a long time ago. Seems very old now. Yeah, there's 10 people from that grand final in the Storm team, which tells you everything you need to know, even with losing Cooper Cronk. There's sort of a symmetry around Leeds and the Storms' grand final, the winning of it with Maguire going for Leeds, Cronk going for the Storm. So it'd be interesting to see how, I think it's Croft who's going to step up into the 7, how he'll do in that shirt. But I think for the most part, it's just about enjoying it for the Leeds lads. They've got nothing to lose. They're out there at the moment. I know a couple of them have been on the set of Neighbours doing extras work, which will be interesting to see how that happens and how that works out when it gets broadcast. But yeah, just making the most of it, I think. It'd be decent to see if Joel Moon comes back from injury. He's a good player, he can make a difference. Yeah, just enjoy it, I think, is the bottom line for the Leeds lads.
And lastly, for our podcast, we're going to the Fans Focus, and this is something we do every week, and we try and get your opinions on something. This week, it is the Roses concept, the Roses origin, the War of the Roses, the Battle of the Roses, whatever you want to call it. This is something that used to be done in the 80s, 90s. The concept died, and it's not really been spoke about. Still played at the amateur level, but not played in the professional level. Is this something that should be of interest? Will this be brought back? Let's see what you guys are saying.
So Keith Butler says, I understand the liking for this game, but surely this highlights one of the issues. The game needs to be nationwide, and it's not exclusive to Lancashire and Yorkshire. The sooner we break away from it's a northern game mentally, the better the game will be for all participants. I don't know what you feel about that. I sort of agree with in some respects.
I agree with the way he's trying to put across his point. What I would disagree with is having this fixture doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be just a northern game. I just feel like this is a fixture that could be advertised well, and it could bring in a monetary value to the game. And I just look in Australia. Australia's the biggest rugby league in the world, and they've got state of origin. And there's a lot of players in the NRL that cannot play state of origin because they do not qualify to play for state of origin. It doesn't make it just a Queensland, New South Wales thing. I know there is a problem in Australia that obviously Western Australia, etc., are cricket-based states, whereas Queensland, New South Wales are rugby league-based states. But I feel like this is a concept that could really catch on, not just in this country, but globally.
Interestingly, there's someone else who's called for perhaps a third team in that, make a tri-series out of everyone outside of Lancashire and Yorkshire. So that's potentially a way around that.
Having exiles,
yeah,
sort of.
Or just anyone from outside, so other domestic players who obviously...
I mean, we had that international origin, didn't we? A few years back, we had England versus the Exiles, which was the Exiles of Super League, and that was a concept that worked because England were probably at that level. Once we got a bit better, it sort of faded away. But maybe that's something that you could look at now, with the sides possibly as strong as they are.
Another one we've got here from Mark Brotherston says, this needs an Aussie type feel to it, maybe a matchroom boxing input to raise the profile and make it a spectacle. And I think in some ways he's right. It screams Eddie Hearn. It screams someone who can publicise everything about it to make it the biggest kind of spectacle it could be. With the way rugby league is at the minute, I don't think they'd have the capabilities and it's not a snub to their marketing abilities, but I don't think they'd be able to market properly to truly get the finished product that they could end up with. Yeah,
I feel like if you look at the marketing for this Super League season off the bat, I mean, you look at the advert from Sky, which I thought was absolutely shambolic. There's no offence to the people that were taking part in the advertisement. I just don't think that it at all encapsulated what rugby league is or what it's about. And I feel like you said, Eddie Hearn was great with the darts because he took what was essential about the darts, if that makes sense. He made it possible to take this game that's played in a pub into a bigger audience. But you need concepts like this. You need concepts that people can grasp onto. And there's already a big call for it amongst fans because they're passionate. They want to see these things happen. And I mean, I've wrote out some possibilities of teams. The teams that could face up against each other would be huge. This would be a great fixture to have. And if you had it around a similar time as Origin, the only problem would be when Origin's happening, players don't play for the clubs. Could we have that concept? Does the league structure need to be sorted out? That's another big question. If we sort out the league structure, do we get a better chance of a Roses game? But I mean, look at these teams. You've got back lines of Tompkins, Makinson, Burgess, Percival, Watkins will be playing for Lancashire. You've got over at Yorkshire, Johnston, Shenton, Connor, Hall, Gale. It's like this is the top of Super League, and they'd all be playing, and I feel like that would be a great fixture to watch.
Yeah, well, people are sceptical about if Hearn's involvement, with whether it was serious or not, but why not make this the love child? Why not make this the experiment to see whether he would be able to make something like this work? There's so many potential suitors for it. There's so many sponsorship opportunities. There's obviously stadiums, Headingley, KCOM, Old Trafford, the DW, just to name a few. Why not take it to the Olympic Park? I don't know. Why not take it to Wembley? They fill it out for, in truth, meaningless semi-finals. They fill it out for NFL games. And there's no reason why the people of Yorkshire and Lancashire, they're so tribal. You see, especially with cricket, they're so tribal. Even more so in rugby league, if they brought this concept back. So why would they not flock to London to watch a game of this magnitude? Why would they not go to Old Trafford to watch
100%.
it?
I would definitely go myself, and I would put myself in that category, and maybe adding that third team would be a massive boost. The only problem with adding the third team is it takes for the advertisement away from the Lancashire-Yorkshire game, which is realistically with the game that people are going to go and watch. But, I mean, it's a concept that can definitely be explored. The new structure for Super League comes out over the course of the next 12 months. They've no idea what they're doing from what I can see. So we obviously have no idea. Once that's sorted out, potentially we could look at moving forward with a Roses game. I think it would be great to bring back. But again, thank you for all your comments on the Fans Focus, and we hope to hear from you again for our next podcast. Okay, and that's where we're going to leave it. So thank you for listening, and please tune in next time.